as you've gotten into this world, you understand the supplement industry a little bit. What are some of the darker sides of the supplement industry? What are some of the shadier things that you think is going on in the industry as a whole?
Yeah, yeah. When I started just even trying to formulate things in my own kitchen and deep diving into it, one of the first things I learned was like I wanted to find some amino acids, right? Because we were developing the pre-workout. And really, the first thing that I learned was like, wow, most of the amino acids were made from human hair, duck feathers, or pig skin. And I was looking
Mm,
into it and I was like, why is that? Why the hell are we doing that? And then you realize it's because it's rich in keratin. Like,
mm,
hair is rich in keratin protein, and then it's easy to break down into amino acids. And so everything I was learning, I was like, this whole entire industry is built around just like cutting corners to make a little bit of money, you
right.
know? And really what I started saying is like, it became like big pharma, like big fitness was just like
Yeah.
another form of it. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Where it was like at the time just these major big fitness brands that were just like using byproducts of manufacturing to make cheap supplements that weren't actually effective. And that one was a big awakening for me. The one that I would say is probably the biggest and that people are hopefully aware of is the GRAS loophole. It's the generally recognized as safe loophole that's in the
Mm,
FDA, where essentially the FDA got so overran and so busy because we had so much technology booming in the food industry at once because of the ultra processed food, takeover, that the FDA was like, we can't regulate all of these ingredients.
mm-hmm.
And so what they did is they essentially did the worst thing you could possibly do as the Food and Drug Administration here to regulate food and drugs is they gave food and drug companies ability to regulate themselves. And they
What could go
invented
wrong?
this loophole. Yeah, they invented this loophole called generally recognized as safe,
Uh-huh.
where they basically said, okay, if you're a food company and developing a new, product, you can now just submit it to this generally recognized as safe, and it's technically not FDA approved, but it's basically FDA verified.
Gotcha.
So they can now basically say, yeah, we got approval on this product by the FDA in the GRAS, and all they have to do is put in this like small fine print that says it's generally recognized as safe. And so what, all the artificial sweeteners and artificial flavors just boomed under that category where food scientists were creating this like crazy. And
Yeah.
basically you can tell people it's kind of FDA approved because it's generally recognized as safe. And the only thing that they had to do was submit a self-funded study showing that it was safe. And
Nice.
so again, it was never actually studied by the FDA. It was only, regulated and studied by the food developers and the food scientists themselves, and then they could say, yeah, it's safe, and they submitted it to that loophole. And so
Wow.
really now we just have a bunch of companies that are regulating themselves, and the FDA got too busy to do that. And then even the more extreme version of that is we do the same thing in medical devices.
Yeah.
And so when I was in that world, in the medical device world, a similar thing happens where you have this process that's called a 510K clearance. And basically, the example that I can give because I was in spine surgery is like there was a new invention that you would go in, remove the disc, you could replace this disc with an expandable cage. And so you put this cage, made of metal in the body, and then you could expand it and jack it up. And like one came to market and they had to go through all the loopholes. They had to go through the FDA. They had to go through all the studies and processes and things like that to get it approved. And then everyone else that came out with one, there's probably like 50 devices like that came out in the next 2 to 3 years that followed. They just have to say, oh, ours is pretty much the same as theirs.
Wow.
And so we're just going to submit it through the 510K clearance because it's not a new technology. It's
Yeah.
just a
Yeah.
new device and a new company. And then they just get automatically approved through the 510K clearance if they did, cadaver studies and things like that and provide like safety studies. That's all done by the company. It's never even been used in a human before, and we can go use it. So like
Yeah.
the FDA just got like way too busy because of the technology boom and ultra processed food and devices and pharma. And so they pretty much just said, screw it. We're going to give, all these companies the ability to self-regulate themselves. And that was really where it bled into supplements, was in the artificial sweeteners, artificial
Hmm.
flavors. Like we didn't have any safety data on it that wasn't just directly from the company.
Right. So generally recognized as safe basically means as long as it doesn't instantly kill you and there's like plausible like that it's not straight up poison, that it's fine, but it probably is poison at a small level. I know that word sounds. But you know what? That's really interesting hearing you say that and kind of how they let companies essentially self-fund and decide for themselves whether they had the budget or not to be proven as generally recognized as safe. But if you kind of like follow that all the way to the top, it's kind of what they do at the top too. I mean, we've just gone through a global pandemic where a medical device was rolled out to millions of people, generally recognized as safe, and now a lot of stuff is coming out where it's like, maybe not so fast. And some of us that were like, I'm just going to wait on this because it seems like they did exactly what you just said, which is where they have this mechanism, this thing that they can bring to market and make a lot of money on it. It's not just about benevolence and protecting people. It's also got some corporate interest and potentially billions or trillions of dollars of an incentive behind it. And they designed the studies and they redacted the studies and they hid the studies and they wanted to hide the studies for another 20 years. But, emergency use authorization, because we're in a pandemic, allowed them to rush something to market. And now we're learning some of the unintended consequences of that. So it's kind of, it reminds me of this idea that like it's idiots all the way up and it's problems all the way down. And, these supplement companies are just a small version of what's happening like endemically at the system, which is just obviously broken and driven by perverse incentives. All right, friends, thanks for tuning in to another episode of Radical Health Radio. We got a fresh new podcast for you every Wednesday. If you enjoyed the show, consider liking, subscribing, reviewing, and rating us on your podcast platform. It helps to spread this message of radical health. We'll see you next week.